Mike's Daily Podcast.
Episode 1318, 1318. Hello, it's Mike Matthews broadcasting from Café Anyway, located somewhere in Podcastro Valley, Mont, the last place on earth. It's a podcast that comes out of a restaurant where the guy, the 40-something-year-old host, he tells you about the news going on at this moment.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
But if you're listening to this like 12 years from now, please just, realize this is a snapshot.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
A snapshot of the times that we're living in. Wait a minute. 20 years from now, I'll be 60-something and I will, have a bunch of wrinkles every single place. I'm getting them now all over my face. But it's all right because I know I've lived.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
And you gotta show the marks of your life. But don't be like a rock star.
Mike's
Rockers today,
Daily
they dye their hair
Podcast.
black.
Yeah!
Black. Because they think that's cool to dye their hair completely black.
Black. The black. Jesus, just stop, Ron. I'm terribly sorry. I don't know why I can't stop saying black. The word black.
Hello, Mr. Burgundy.
Black.
Stop.
Black.
Stop saying black.
Black. If I don't say it, I'll pass out.
Look who just walked in while we were talking about rock stars, how they like to dye their hair black, and then put way too many tattoos on their body. They cover themselves in black dye and black ink, is what I'm saying. Hello, my commander. It's Madame Rootabega. Look who I walked in.
Hello there, Mike. This is Valentino, the parking attendant.
And this is Bison Bentley. Do you know that?
Mike, rock stars are cool because they get on the stage, and even when they're really friggin' old, they got the black hair.
Yeah. I have dated a rock star. Woo. Yeah, I know, like David Bowie or somebody way back. Yeah, okay. That's great. I was watching a very interesting thing on C-SPAN yesterday about how the media has changed and journalism has changed, and they had these guys from the New York Times and CNN, and
here's today's podcast picture.
The podcast picture is of San Leandro Marina. I know I have posted many pictures from there, but this is from last week. And there was this beautiful tree. Things are blooming like crazy all over the Bay Area. Forget about going to Washington, D.C. to see the cherry blossoms. Everything's blossoming around the Bay Area. And I didn't really see too much of that when I lived in Southern California, so it's nice. And there's this one tree with these crazy branches that have been formed by the extreme winds that sometimes come through the San Leandro Marina. And it has these blossoms. And, well, it was just before the big rainy weekend that we had that started on Friday. And you can see it's a neat picture. There's the bay. I think a Coast Guard or somebody on a Boston whaler just pulled up to the dock next to it. See that picture now at mikesdailypodcast.com. Yes, I'm trying to describe it to you in audio form, but you can see it visually. Of course, I will never, ever, ever do a video podcast, a VOD pod, and I'll tell you why. That would be the most boring thing possible. I've always loved the audio world. That's been my gig. And yes, when I was younger, I said, I watched Saturday Night Live, and I thought I could do a show like something blending Saturday Night Live and talk shows. But you know what? Jimmy Fallon went and did that, so he does a great job. He looks way better on camera than I do. He does cool things like does a dance-off with Kate Upton. Oh my God, Kate Upton. What she was wearing that day. I mean, it wasn't much per usual with Kate Upton, but she had this cool little dress and she was dancing, and she did this one dance where you're walking through spider webs. And that was intriguing. Kate Upton. People hate her. I think She's intriguing. So that's normal, whatever. But vodcasts, I'm not a fan of. The quick edits, I don't like that. I like to, I'm really not editing anything on this show. Wait, I just edited, oh my gosh. Be so thankful just now I chopped out about 3 hours of me trying to sing all the lyrics to one of the best songs of all time, Paradise City by Guns N' Roses. I started off with, I just cut out me trying to sing Paradise City. It starts off with, I just cut out me trying to so there's not that much editing going on this show. But I did want to edit out a piece of my life over the weekend. I work at this music station on the weekend, where we play Guns N' Roses, and their song Paradise City goes like I just edited out me trying to sing Guns N' Roses once again, and I will stop doing that. There's so many better bands to try and sing than them. But this young lady that works there, she and another young lady that worked there, they were talking to me, and the topic turned to age, and I've talked about this one girl I've gone roller skating with, her and her friend before, and she said basically that because I was coming out of the roller skating rink with them, I was walking outside and I slipped on some grass because the grass was wet, because we've been getting a lot of rain in the Bay Area, and I slipped and kind of almost fell, but I caught myself. And this girl said, "Oh, Mike, don't fall. You're so old, you'll die. If you fall down, you'll die." So she and I had a conversation, and yet again, age came up as we spoke this weekend. And not only age, but we were talking about flaxseed. We were talking about working in radio. We were talking about this podcast. She said, "Do you get paid to do this podcast?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Then why do you do it?" And I said, "Well, why do we do anything that we get?" She goes, "I don't make any money here." And I said, "Well, why do you do this? Why do you do radio?" "Well, I need to put it on my resume because I'm going to a state school and blah, blah, blah." So with all the ageist comments that were coming at me over the weekend, I wanted to edit that out, as I have edited out Paradise City, which goes a little like, I just edited out me trying to sing it once again, and I will never, ever bring up Paradise City ever again. So what I'm saying is, sometimes we need that was what the journalists were saying on C-SPAN, was that they don't like bloggers, which leads me back to vloggers and podcasting. And they said, we don't like bloggers because they don't have editors. See, working here at the New York Times, I have an editor that edits what I say, said this journalist. And the fake news media, they don't have editors and blah. It all has to do with the editors. It all has to do with someone censoring you and making sure that what you're saying, giving you a second opinion. And maybe that's what's wrong with this show, is I don't have an editor. I have an internal editor that helps out a little bit, so I guess in some ways I have an editor. But yeah, maybe you're listening to the show because there is no editor involved. I'm just talking straight to you. Whatever. Cafe whatever. Ooh, I don't have that anymore, do I? Oh, here it is.
Anyway.
Café Anyway.
Anyway.
That's what I was wanting to get to today. And I haven't brought up Basil the Boxer yet. Well, there, I just did. The wonderful website, mikesdailypodcast.com, where now I'm up to D. I've gotten through all the C's, A, B's, and C's of people that I've interviewed on Mike's Daily Podcast. I'm alphabetizing all the interviews, but you can hear all of them at mikesdailypodcast.com and help out the show through that Amazon link. Click on that and buy whatever it is you're going to buy. That helps us out. There's also the link to PayPal, and you can become an inglorious Mike's Daily Podcaster through that. mikesdailypodcast.com. And now a segment called Do You Know Dat? Bison Bentley, take it away.
It's Bison Bentley's Do You Know Dat?
Hey, this is Bison Bentley, and Mike Matthews has a couple of stories that'll make you want to ask yourself, do you know that? Do you know that? Do you know that? So the big news today, pivoting off what the White House considers a successful U.S. missile strike in Syria, the Trump administration sent a not-so-subtle message yesterday to North Korea. Don't risk being next. With growing signs that North Korea's Pyongyang may be preparing a sixth nuclear test, a U.S. aircraft carrier strike force near Singapore was diverted north toward the Korean peninsula. President Trump spoke to leaders in Tokyo and Seoul, and senior administration officials made pointed note of the full range of options available to counter threats in the U.S. or its allies. The sudden flurry of action centering on North Korea came after Trump's summit in Florida. This was on Friday, with President Xi Jinping. One of these days I'll get that name right. The Chinese president. The two leaders publicly played down their economic and political disputes and addressed their common interest in reining in North Korea's mercurial leader, Kim Jong-un, according to the Washington Bureau of the Tribune Network. North Korea has repeatedly said that it plans to test an intercontinental ballistic missile or conduct another underground nuclear test. The spotlight's turn from Syria to North Korea carries benefits as well as risks for the Trump administration, now nearing its 100-day mark. But with a limited but decisive response to Syrian President Bashar Assad's alleged use of banned sarin nerve gas on Syrian civilians, Trump won praise from previously skeptical U.S. allies in Europe and from some of his harshest critics at home. Which leads us to the midterm elections. And The Hill website has said that Republicans control both the House and Senate, but the unified GOP Congress might not last past the midterms. House Republicans are seeing signs that Democrats could take a significant number of House seats in the 2018 elections. Now, we didn't hear that last election. We heard that maybe in the Senate, Democrats would take some seats, but that didn't happen. President Trump's approval rating currently sits in the low 40s, a historic low for this point in a presidency. It'll be interesting to see, though, if we see some change with that after the Syrian strike. The GOP Congress, meanwhile, has achieved no major legislative goals in Trump's first 70 days in office. As you know, the whole healthcare thing went bust. Questions about Russia's interference in the 2016 election and the FBI's investigation into possible collusion between Moscow and the Trump campaign continue to cast a shadow over the government and distract from the party's legislative efforts. Enthusiasm on the left is high, giving Democrats hope that they will fill their coffers and increase voter turnout in special elections like the nationally watched House special election in Georgia. Still, there's plenty of time for things to change over the next 19 months. Winning back the House will be an uphill climb for Democrats, even in the most favorable circumstances, since the way district lines are drawn means that only a few dozen seats are seen as competitive. But early signs are positive for Democrats. The case for Democratic gains is bolstered by the historical trend that sees the president's party typically lose seats in the midterm. Meanwhile, hackers have gotten into Texas. Dallas city officials said on Saturday that a hacker is to blame for setting off all the city's 156 emergency outdoor sirens that wailed for an hour and a half overnight. Woke everyone up, and everyone was really upset. Rocky Vaz, that's his name, Rocky Vaz. Okay. Director of the Rocky Vaz. Director of the city's Office of Emergency Management in Texas said engineers determined an unidentified hacker somewhere in the Dallas area was responsible, but has not been tracked down. The hacker tricked the system to send repeat signals, activating each siren 60 times during the night. So that started around 11:42 on Friday night and continued until 1:17 on Saturday. The blaring sirens, used primarily to warn off tornadoes and other severe weather, prompted anxious residents to call 911, clogging up that system. At one point, 911 calls were backed up for 6 minutes instead of the normal wait of 10 seconds. Quantum computing could have helped ease this problem. I make this suggestion too, Rocky Vaz. Consider 3 hair-pulling problems, said Newsweek. 1% of the world's energy is used every year just to produce fertilizer. Solar panels aren't powerful enough to provide all the power for most homes. Investing in stocks often feels like a game of Russian roulette. Those seemingly disparate issues can be solved by the same tool, according to some scientists: quantum computing. Quantum computers they use superconducting particles to perform tasks and have long been seen as a luxury for the top academic echelon, far removed from the common individual. But it's quickly changing. IBM has been dabbling with commercial possibilities when last year it released Quantum Experience, a cloud-based quantum computing service researchers could use to run experiments without having to buy a quantum system. Last month, IBM took that program further and announced IBM Q, the first cloud quantum computing system for commercial use. Companies will be able to buy time on IBM's quantum computers in New York State, though IBM has not set a release date or price, and it is expected to be financially prohibitive to smaller companies at first. Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, not too far from where I am sitting at this moment here at Café Anyway. They have Jared McLean there, a computing science fellow, and Jared says the announcement is exciting because quantum computing wasn't expected to hit commercial markets for decades. Last year, some experts estimated commercial experimentation could be 5 to 40 years away, yet here we are, and the potential applications could disrupt the way pharmaceutical companies make medicine, the way logistics companies schedule trains, and the way hedge fund managers gain an edge in the stock market. McLean says, we're seeing more application areas start to develop all the time now that people are looking at quantum. Now, quantum computing is as different from traditional computing as an abacus is from a MacBook. Classical computing was invented in the 40s. Now, take everything you know about how a class of computers works and forget it. Quantum computers are made up of parts called qubits, also known as quantum bits. On some problems, they leverage the strange physics of quantum mechanics to work faster than chips on a traditional computer. Just as a plane cannot exactly compare to a race car, a classical computer will still be able to do some things better than quantum, vice versa. They're just different. And then you need to jump into quantum mechanics to understand what qubits are. Doesn't follow the same rules of physics we're used to. Quantum entanglement and quantum superposition are particularly important. They defy common sense, but take place only in environments that are incredibly tidy. And it allows the qubit to do 2 things at once. Because you see, in our current world, we have a 0-1 configuration, the binary world. Whereas qubits, well, all kinds of stuff can happen. And now I have completely lost you. Finally, were you one of these people that played around with your PC and said, I'm gonna mess around with my PC, I'm gonna take parts out and put stuff in, and woo! I had some male friends, only male friends, that would do that. Well, you know, there was a time that you would be able to do that with your smartphone. But apparently that has gone away and it's run out of steam. Google had a thing called Aura, There was a thing called LG had a G5 that would do it, a detachable chin that connected with other accessories. Lenovo had the Motor Z phones, but that's going away. With Lenovo as the last man standing, the mix and match phones probably won't ever have the same momentum again. At its most basic bit, people like to tinker, said a mobile analyst and director for the Emerging Device Strategies company. The idea of getting a product and improving it, it's almost human nature to want to take it apart and improve it. But beginning of last year, LG unveiled the G5 at the annual Mobile World Conference in Barcelona. Lenovo had something, so there was still stuff going up, but then in the middle of the year, momentum for a modular phone was buzzing. And the problem, though, is that the ability to snap components on and off a phone sounds simple. The mechanical and technical complexity, though, is immense. All modules have to be standardized and be able to communicate with one another without sucking up too much battery. Money for research and development for these efforts would be costly to a manufacturer, and no company would want to be blamed for a third party's module failure or incompatibility. So in the end, it has to be one part, one thing, and the modular thing is going away as we go outside a Café Anyway, as we are going away somewhere here in Podcastro Valley. Thank you for listening to the show. I tried to inform you with the help of a little bit of an internal editor and a little bit of help from CNET on that last story. And thank you so much for listening. Next show, it's going to be Chely Shoehart, Floyd the Floorman, and John Deere the Engineer. Thanks for listening to the show. Have I said thank you enough? Sorry, I didn't have my internal editor on.
Mike's Daily Podcast is written and produced and performed by Mike Matthews. His podcast is super easy to find. Download or listen to his show and read his blog at mikesdailypodcast.com. Email Mike now at mikesdailypodcast@gmail.com. See you tomorrow. Bye!